The mind behind the mirror. Beneath the ruins of an abandoned biotech complex, far beyond any government radar, Helix pulsed like a living organism. Machines hummed with cold precision, walls shimmered with codes, and cables slithered like veins feeding the heart of a sleeping monster. In the center of this underground labyrinth stood a man no one dared to name aloud, Dr. Arthas Vale. Once a scientist for the same elite program that trained the hidden heroes, he had vanished decades ago, believed dead, burned in a lab explosion. But the truth was darker. Arthas had become Helix. He now stood before a glass chamber filled with liquid silver. Inside floated a human silhouette, incomplete, fragile, and horrifyingly familiar. It was Prototype 09, a synthetic soldier engineered using fragments of memory taken from Frank's father. He was their strongest, Arthas murmured, eyes burning with obsession. Now he will be ours. The lab around him responded to his voice. Screens flickered with endless data, blueprints, genetic sequences, and coded maps. A holographic display projected Project Mirrormind, a glowing brain with a mirror fracturing across its surface. It was the experiment that promised to merge human consciousness with artificial control. But something was wrong. One of the terminals glitched, flashing in red. External interference detected. Arthas's smile thinned. So, someone found a way in. Miles away, hidden beneath the Black Haven, Annie sat before a stolen Helix terminal, her eyes darting rapidly across the streaming code. She didn't know what exactly she was hacking into, but the moment she saw that fractured brain hologram, her pulse spiked. "Frank," she whispered, "I think I found something they never wanted anyone to see." Meanwhile, deep in his cell of discipline, Frank's instincts began to twist with unease. He didn't know why, but somewhere inside, a voice that sounded like his father's whispered, "He's still alive, but not as you remember him." A shadow crossed Frank's eyes. And far below, Dr. Arthas Vale looked straight into the surveillance feed, his cold gaze locking onto Annie's face through the flickering screen. "So the children of the hidden hero have found me. Let the game begin." The Black Haven slept in silence, but Annie's room was alive with 1,000 screens. Lines of code rippled like waves, glowing reflections flickering across her sharp, determined eyes. The air buzzed with static, the faint hum of encrypted servers buried beneath miles of Earth. She'd been tracing the data trail for hours, following fragments of Project Mirrormind that shouldn't exist outside Helix's core. Every firewall she bypassed, every encryption she broke, revealed something more twisted. She wasn't just hacking a system, she was peeling away layers of a mind. "Come on," she whispered, fingers racing over the keyboard. "Show me what you're hiding." And then, her screen flickered. For a moment, she saw something that wasn't code. It was an eye. An artificial one, silver and pulsing, staring straight through her screen. A distorted voice followed, low and mechanical. "You shouldn't be here, little mirror." Annie froze. She tried to disconnect, but the system locked her in. The codes began rewriting themselves, whispering her name. Her pulse quickened. The lights dimmed. The air grew cold. Suddenly, Raven appeared at the door, silent but urgent. "Step away from the terminal, Annie." "I found something," she said breathlessly. "Someone inside the system. He knows me." Raven's face tightened beneath his mask. He reached out and unplugged the entire console. Sparks flared. The screens went black. "That wasn't someone," he said. "That was something. You just touched the edge of Project Mirrormind, the network that eats memories." Annie's voice trembled. "It knew my name, Raven. How?" Raven looked at her, eyes dark with unspoken truth. "Because it's connected to your father's mind." Across the ocean, inside Helix's core facility, alarms blared. Dr. Arthas Vale stood before a cluster of panicking scientists. The holographic brain pulsed violently, as if alive. "She made contact," Vale hissed. "The girl has her father's signature code in her blood. She's the key we've been missing." He turned toward the chamber holding Prototype 09, and as the lights shifted, a faint heartbeat echoed from within. "Awaken him," Vale ordered. "Let him find his children." The scientists hesitated. "But sir, he's not stable. His consciousness could." "Do it." Vale's voice cracked through the room like lightning. Let the mirror reflect. The chamber filled with a blinding light. Somewhere deep in the dark network, Annie's screens flickered back on, just for a second, showing a single message. "Hello, Annie." Her breath caught. "Frank," she whispered, though she didn't know why that name came first. The awakening code. The air inside the Black Haven felt heavier that night. Every light seemed dimmer, every corridor colder. Raven stood at the central command table, the glow from Annie's still offline console painting hard shadows across his mask. Frank burst into the room, breathing fast. "What happened?" Annie said she touched something. Raven's voice was low. "She brushed against Project Mirror Mind." "That Helix thing again. What is it really?" Raven turned the screen toward him. The image wasn't data, it was a pulse. A rhythmic flicker that moved like a heartbeat made of light. "It's not a program, Frank. It's consciousness. A network built from human minds. And one of those minds was your father's." Frank froze. For a heartbeat, the world tilted. He stared at the light, unable to breathe. "You're saying my father's alive?" "Alive isn't the word," Raven said. "He was copied. Helix turned the heroes they captured into digital ghosts. But your father's mind resisted deletion. That's why they call him the Echo." Before Frank could answer, alarms roared through the base. A crimson light washed the room. Annie's monitors flared to life on their own, symbols racing faster than thought. Intrusion detected. The Black Haven shuddered. Somewhere deep beneath them, steel screamed as if the earth itself was twisting. Raven slammed a hand on the console. "Helix found us." "How?" Annie gasped. "Through your signal. When you touched the network, they followed the thread back here." Without another word, Raven grabbed his rifle, the sound of the chamber locking echoing like thunder. "Frank, suit up. We're leaving the surface tunnels. We can't let them breach the Haven's core." As they ran down the dark corridor, sparks fell from the ceiling. The sound of mechanical footsteps echoed from above, precision, inhuman, relentless. Frank's thoughts spiraled. His father's face. The glow of that pulse. The whisper that still echoed in his head. "Hello, Annie." He clenched his fists. "If my father's trapped in that system, I'll bring him back." Raven looked at him. "You might have to destroy him to save him." The tunnels opened into the lower vault, a vast chamber lined with flickering lights and ancient tech. Annie was already there, typing furiously into a handheld terminal. "I can shut them out," she said. "Just give me 2 minutes." Raven covered the main corridor, firing a burst that shattered the first Helix drone as it crawled through the vent. Sparks rained. The sound of whirring metal filled the air. Frank moved beside him, the training in his muscles taking over, precise strikes, perfect balance. He wasn't the same boy anymore. Then the vault door behind them began to glow. Symbols burned into its metal surface, the same pulse pattern from Annie's screen. "No," Raven whispered. "They're not breaking in, they're calling something out." The metal split. From the light stepped a tall, spectral figure wrapped in shimmering data, half real, half digital. Its voice was both static and sorrow. "Frank, my son." Frank's knees almost gave way. "Dad." The figure flickered, reaching out a trembling hand. "They used me. But there's no time. Mirror Mind is awakening. You must." His voice distorted, splitting into dozens of tones. Behind the glowing figure, the shadows twisted into the Helix insignia, pulsing like a heartbeat. Annie screamed. The connection surged again. Frank grabbed her, pulling her back. "Raven, cut the power." Raven yanked the main breaker. Everything went dark. For a moment, there was only the sound of their breathing and the echo of that one word still lingering in the dark. Awakening. A cold silence hung over the Black Haven. The lights were dim, powered only by backup cells. Dust floated lazily through beams of flickering blue light. Frank sat beside the inactive control console, his knuckles bruised, eyes hollow. He hadn't spoken since the collapse. Annie, on the other hand, hadn't stopped typing, desperate, relentless, trying to restore what the surge destroyed. Raven stood behind them like a shadow, silent, motionless, watching. "It wasn't a dream," Frank whispered. He said my name, Raven. He looked at me. I saw it too, Annie said softly. That wasn't just data, it was consciousness. His consciousness. Raven finally spoke, his voice quiet but heavy. You both need to understand what that means. If your father's mind exists inside Mirror Mind, then Helix didn't just capture him. They replicated him. And that copy might not know it's a copy. Annie paused, hands frozen mid-type. You mean he could be dangerous? Raven nodded. Or worse, a weapon. The words hung in the air like smoke. Frank rose slowly, his shadow stretching across the flickering monitors. Then we find him before they use him. Before he becomes something he never wanted to be. Miles away, inside the Helix core facility, Dr. Arthas Vale stood before a wall of digital projections. The holographic brain, the mirror mind, pulsed erratically, its veins of light now spreading through the entire network like living roots. A technician ran up, panic in his voice. Sir, the entity is moving through our systems. It's rewriting our firewalls in real time. Vale didn't look away from the screen. Good. That means it's thinking. The man hesitated. Thinking. Or rebelling. Vale smirked. There's no difference. Evolution always looks like rebellion at first. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. The holographic brain shimmered, and then the same voice that spoke to Annie echoed softly through the control room. Where am I? Every monitor flared with a glowing pulse, the same signal signature as Frank's father. Vale's smile faded. No, not yet. You're not supposed to wake this soon. You took everything from me, the voice said. You turned me into this. The systems began to overload. Sparks flew. Several scientists backed away, terrified. Vale leaned closer to the projection. You're not him. You're the future. And the Mercury bloodline will complete you. The lights exploded. The entire facility went dark. Back in the Haven, Annie gasped as one of her dead monitors flickered back to life on its own. Static. Then a distorted image, half face, half code, appeared for just a moment. Her father's voice whispered through the static. Annie, don't trust the shadows. The Haven isn't safe. Then, silence. She turned to Frank, pale and trembling. He's warning us, Frank. Someone here isn't who they say they are. Raven looked at them both, his mask unreadable. Then it's time to find out who's watching us. Shadows in the Haven. The night inside the Black Haven was not silent anymore. The hum of machinery sounded different, slower, heavier, as though the underground city itself had begun to breathe. Dust drifted through the narrow corridors, and the faint echo of metal against metal whispered from somewhere unseen. Raven moved through the dim passageways like a ghost, his boots making no sound on the steel floor. Behind his mask, his eyes flicked from shadow to shadow, tracking the faint glow of sensors embedded in the walls. Something had changed in the network. He could feel it, like static crawling along the skin. Ever since the surge, the Haven's mainframe had been corrupted in subtle ways. Doors opened half a second slower, security feeds glitched for no reason, and encrypted files he once trusted now asked for passwords he never set. He stopped at the central data core, a massive cylindrical column surrounded by humming conduits and dripping coolant. The surface of the column pulsed faintly, as if mirroring a heartbeat. "You're awake too," he murmured. He inserted a small data key into the side port. Lines of encrypted text filled his visor. He began tracing signals, watching the data paths like a hunter following footprints in the snow. The pattern was familiar. Too familiar. It was an internal access signature. Someone inside the Haven had been feeding data to an external source. Raven's breath slowed. His pulse did not. Across the base, Frank and Annie sat at the long steel table in the mess hall. Half the lights were out, and the silence between them was heavier than the air. Annie was still pale from what she'd seen, the brief flicker of their father's image, the warning. "He said the Haven isn't safe," she whispered. "What if he meant one of us?" Frank didn't answer immediately. He was staring at his hands, bruised, scarred, still trembling slightly from the last battle. "Raven built this place," he said. "He saved us. If there's something wrong here, he'll find it." "You trust him completely?" With my life, Frank said without hesitation. But I don't know if I can say the same about anyone else. The lights flickered again. From the hallway came the faint echo of footsteps, steady, deliberate. Frank turned, muscles tightening. But when the figure appeared, it wasn't Raven. It was Elias. The old hero moved slower now, his long coat brushing the floor, his gray hair falling into his eyes. There was a tiredness about him, not physical, but spiritual. "You two shouldn't be out here alone," he said. "The Haven's energy grid is unstable. Half the surveillance systems are blind." Annie met his gaze. "Did you know about the breach?" Elias hesitated, just long enough for Frank to notice. "Raven told me he was investigating. He thinks someone here opened the gate for Helix." "You think it was us?" Frank snapped. "No," Elias said softly. "But someone close to you, maybe. Someone with access." Down in the core chamber, Raven's visor beeped twice. Confirmation. The internal data leak originated from Terminal C-17, a private console located inside Elias's quarters. He didn't want to believe it. Elias was one of the few who still carried the ideals of the old world, the same ideals Frank's father had lived and died for. But the evidence didn't lie. The signal trail was clean, precise, professional. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were doing. Raven shut down the link, turned off his interface, and moved quietly toward the residential wing. Annie followed Frank through the dim corridor. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. The Haven was always strange like that. Temperature shifted with emotion, as if the steel walls themselves remembered pain. "Frank," Annie whispered, "if what Dad said is true, then someone's already working for Helix." "We'll find out who," he said. "No matter what it costs." They reached Elias's door just as Raven appeared from the opposite hallway. His mask turned toward them sharply. "Step back," Raven ordered. "Why? What's going on?" Frank demanded. "Because if I'm right," Raven said, drawing his sidearm, "the enemy's been sleeping next to us." He entered a command on his wrist pad. The door slid open with a hiss, and inside, the small quarters were pitch black except for the pale glow of a console still active. On its screen ran a live transmission, a data stream from Helix's core network. Frank's heart dropped. Annie gasped. Raven stepped closer, scanning the feed. There, embedded in the transmission, was the same pulse pattern from the last attack. The mirror mind signal. "Elias," Raven whispered. "Behind you," came a voice. They turned. Elias stood in the doorway, eyes calm but distant, a faint light reflecting in his pupils, the same pulsing rhythm as the screen. "You shouldn't have come here, Raven." "Tell me why, Elias," Raven said quietly. "You were one of us." Elias's expression didn't change. "I still am. But the world we fought for died long ago. Helix isn't the enemy, it's the evolution. I saw what the old heroes became, martyrs, ghosts, memories that led nowhere. Mirror Mind offers something more, permanence." Annie stepped forward, her voice trembling. "You sold our father's memory to them?" Elias looked at her with something almost like pity. "Your father gave them his mind willingly. He wanted to save humanity, and in a way he did. You just can't see it yet." Raven raised his gun. "Enough." The air tensed. Every sound seemed to vanish. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, the console behind Elias flared, light flooding the room. The pulse pattern spread across the walls, crawling like veins. "You're already too late," Elias whispered. "The Haven's core is infected. By dawn, it won't matter who's right." He moved faster than any man his age should have been able to. He struck Raven's arm, twisted, and vanished into the dark corridor beyond before a single shot could fire. "He's heading for the core," Frank shouted. "Then we stop him there," Raven barked, chasing after him. Annie hesitated for a second, staring at the console still glowing with that inhuman light. Then she pulled a drive from her pocket, jammed it into the port, and copied everything, every line of data, every trace of her father's echo. "You said you wanted us to see, Elias," she whispered. "Then I will." Minutes later, alarms ripped through the Haven once again. Elias had reached the central core, his silhouette barely visible through the flood of red warning lights. Raven's voice echoed through the chamber. "You can't win this, Elias." Elias turned, his eyes glowing faintly. "It's not about winning. It's about surviving what's coming." He pressed his hand to the core's control panel. The entire chamber shuddered. Frank lunged forward, too late. A shockwave of white light filled the room, and for a split second, they all heard it, a whisper that wasn't from this world, wasn't from any machine. "Awaken the rest." When the light faded, Elias was gone. The core pulsed brighter than before, alive and aware. Raven turned to Frank and Annie, his voice barely a whisper. "The infection's spreading. Helix is inside the haven now." Frank looked at the trembling light. "Then it's time we go inside it."